Happy birthday,
Happy
snowman.
birthday, snowman.
Just before we start.
Yeah, the mic's on. Go on.
Can I?
Yeah, happy birthday, snowman.
Happy birthday, snowman.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Sci Guys Live, the show where we bring you the coolest news and craziest facts from the science world. Not only that, it's your chance to get involved, so make sure you're ready with your comments, questions, and corrections. As always, I'm Corey, and I'm joined here live by my co-host, Jamp and Luke Cutforth.
Hello!
I'm Jam. He's Luke.
I'm
Cutforth.
Luke Cutforth.
He has a last name? We don't.
No.
That's the format.
Yep,
That's the whole show.
let's just start the show. Have you guys got any stories for us? Who's got a story?
I actually, no stories.
No story this
Sorry.
week? Yeah,
No,
me
no,
neither.
Jam.
Sorry, no story.
No. Run the
Join
show
us
on
next
your-
week. for Sci Guys. I've got a story.
You've got a story? Fantastic.
about some clever canines.
Really? Ooh.
Our puppy pals. So,
Oh my, how many alliterations have you got in this story?
I came up with two.
Okay.
I've used them already.
Blew them all.
I came up with, my original was perceptive puppies, but it didn't work as well.
Delightful doggos.
Delightful doggos. Anyway, turns out dogs are born.
Yes.
with the,
No way.
Yeah, dogs
Amazing.
are born.
I thought
Dogs,
they just poofed into existence.
I thought they hatched
I'm
from
not even a
eggs.
sentence into my story.
Sorry.
Not even a sentence into my story. Puppies are born with the innate ability to understand human communication.
What? Oh, this makes sense.
Yeah, on some level. Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, yeah, we bred them for that. That adds up.
Well, yeah, that's the end of my story. Okay, good. No, no. That's what we're going to talk about. But it turns out it's more genetic than we originally thought it was. Well, I guess then you might assume 2-month-old puppies can recognize pointing and any pointing related social cues. For example, if you were to like point
They
out
know it's
something to
rude,
them,
yeah.
they'll be like, oh, and they'll get socially conscious.
That's really interesting because I had heard that dogs can't understand pointing because it takes quite a lot of processing power to understand, like to create an extension from a point and understand the direction. I thought that dogs couldn't understand that because I point to things with my dog all the time
Yeah.
and she literally just doesn't have a clue.
Maybe your dog
Well,
just doesn't like you.
Maybe it's a dumb dog.
True.
Yeah.
She doesn't like my recommendations.
Yeah.
Look over there.
No.
No.
You've
Have you seen
led
this
me
film?
astray before. I'm not.
Well, Emily Bray at the University of Arizona has done an experiment with her colleagues regarding puppies and pointing.
I thought you meant all of her colleagues were dogs.
Some of our colleagues are dogs, technically.
Yes, to be fair, she's the only named colleague, so could be the only human. Bray has said, although individual relationships with people might influence this social communication behavior, at least 40% of this ability comes from genetics alone. She did an experiment where they took 375 eight-week-old golden retrievers and Labradors, combined 375, and these were all puppies that were bred to be service dogs. They did 3 tests. The first test involved 3 cups, 2 were empty, one of them had hidden food inside. Now, when the researchers pointed to the cup with the food in, the dogs successfully found the food 70% of the time,
Ooh, greater than random chance.
as opposed to the control group who could only get it just above just random chance.
Right, so it's
it was
not
like
sniffing.
So yeah, it's not smelling or anything. So they controlled for being able to sniff out the food. Maybe they could a little bit because it was just above random chance. But the pointing genuinely helped.
That makes me worry about drug finding dogs.
What do
If
you mean?
if these dogs
Don't point at your drugs, Corey.
well, my point is no.
Oopsie.
Ooh.
Don't arrest me.
No, the dog's only sniffing here because I'm pointing. You see.
You just point away from your drugs.
Yeah.
And they're like,
over there.
No, I mean that if these dogs, there is probably a good reason for this, but if these dogs are only able to find the hidden food at slightly above 50%, slightly above random chance,
Yeah.
then they must not be very good at sniffing stuff out, if it's just food in a cup.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's something
Bad
else.
Noses.
Yeah, maybe
These
it's
were
bad nosed
8 weeks
dogs.
old. And the reason they were 8 weeks old is because that's the age where they become sensitive. Not sensitive, but like food-based rewards work on them at
Okay.
8 weeks. So they
makes
wanted
sense.
they wanted to go younger, but it wouldn't work anyway. Yes, the second experiment involved researchers speaking in baby talk to the dogs.
Go over to the third car.
Oh, who's a cute little puppy? Which showed that the puppies will stare at you, indicating that they understand that you're trying to communicate with them. Which it seems like a little thing, but when I thought about it, I was like, that's quite impressive, actually.
Yeah,
They
it's not just a
understand
noise.
that we're talking to them.
But did they do a control where they just made like random noises? Because they could just be looking at the source of a noise.
Yeah, this is true. I didn't look into the
I
control.
mean,
of
baby
that one,
talk
to
is
be
just
fair.
random noises, isn't it?
Why?
Yeah.
You're talking in little baby voices, as opposed to like.
But you could be talking to
No, I know.
another person.
I mean, yeah, I just mean that, you could use something else making a noise, like a speaker or
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
a scarecrow. I don't know. Something like that.
Scarecrows don't make. I suppose if you put a speaker
Speaker
in
inside the
that's
scarecrow.
still looking at a speaker. Then, Corey.
Well, no,
think
'cause
of something that's not a speaker.
No, that's not true.
speaker's
That's not true.
communicating
That
with
is
me.
not true. If you can't look at a speaker if it's hidden inside of a scarecrow.
Okay.
Yeah,
fair
you're looking
enough.
towards the speaker. Maybe you're
Yeah.
not looking at it.
I didn't know you put speakers inside scarecrows.
You don't. I'm just saying you physically can. They're filled with straw.
we should start doing it.
Yeah.
I don't know how we'd power the speaker, but
We just plug it into. It's
Battery
easy.
pack.
You just run
Oh,
a
solar
wire
power.
down. Well, you could. I mean, but that solar power. You could run a wire down. Yeah, to a solar power panel.
In the hat,
But
like in the scarecrow hat. The scarecrow hat is a solar panel.
would
Inspector
that,
Gadget
makes-
stuff.
would that have
makes
enough
crow
surface
noises.
area though to really power this speaker?
But it would only make and a motion detector, so it only makes the noise when there's a motion detected. So then it
Okay.
can charge.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you
A
just
charge. You put a motor in it, and that way the scarecrow charges whatever.
Exactly. Scarecrow army. Get them all swords.
That's just Doctor Who. That's an entire Doctor Who episode.
Yeah. Sure.
Jan, would you like to
Where
continue
is
with
this
your
chat
story?
and the third one involved just getting puppies to look at a sealed box that was full of food and watch them try and open it unassisted. But what they were looking out for was whether the dogs would ask for help, which they didn't. But what they'd be looking for was that same like prolonged eye contact with the researchers.
eye contact. Prolonged eye contact.
Bo Burnham. They would look at the researchers, maybe like glance at the researchers, but they wouldn't ask for help. That's what we have to. This is asking help in dog terms, which is just like giving the
Looking.
puppy dog.
Yeah,
eyes, like,
puppy dog
please
eyes,
help
yeah.
me.
I love the way they tilt their little heads. Like, when
Yeah.
you make noises, they're like,
Oh yeah, it's because they're trying to figure out
What are you saying?
I think was it where the noise is coming from, or they're like twisting their head because it means they can hear differently with
I
the
think so.
different ears, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Along those lines.
yeah, something along those lines. Something to do with hearing, I think. You know.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. But this just shows that they're born with the ability to understand when people are communicating with them, but they don't necessarily have the skills to ask for help or like communicate back.
Much like normal babies.
Yeah. Well, I've made a note here. I was like, compare this to babies. It's like babies aren't born with the genetic ability to speak English. Well, they are.
They're born to go.
Not born with, yeah. Not with they're not born with the ability to speak English, but they learn it socially.
Babies are born
Yeah.
with the ability to.
I mean, the
Process
knowledge,
language.
the
Yeah.
knowledge, the knowledge of
I mean,
English.
well, that's difficult because babies I think in the womb babies pick up some kind of language. So that when
They
a baby is
start
born,
practicing.
their baby babble is tailored to the language that they.
Wow.
Yeah.
I
There's-
can't
there's
remember if
sounds
they're
that
born or
come
slightly
through
before
the-
they're born.
Yeah.
But I know that baby babble after a while is tailored to the language that they're learning, and babies innately have the ability to produce all of the sounds that all humans can make. But and to decide to discern between them. So a baby that's just born could discern between the different sounds that people make. Whereas if you start learning English, you can't tell the difference between the different tonal sounds in Chinese. Whereas if you start learning Japanese, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the L and R sound that we have in
Wow.
English.
I
Yeah.
believe
I did
you're
not know.
correct that because babies start practicing sounds non-verbally before they start making them.
Oh yeah,
So that's what I think that's what they do in the womb is they like practice them either in their head, as in they non-verbally. They just practice them in their head, and then suddenly get the confidence to do it out loud. I think that's what they're doing in the womb as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, babies are because they know so little. They're learning all the time. Yeah, that face, this constantly surprised by the world.
That's how I still look, especially with this podcast. Bray concluded that over the course of I can't say this word. Domestication from wolf to dog, there's been a clear selection of these social skills. It's something that's ingrained in them, and it emerges at a really young age, even before they've had much experience with humans. So basically what she's trying to say there is that because thousands of years ago, when we were first domesticating dogs, going through that process, we would obviously selectively breed them, and we would probably breed the ones that could communicate with us better to some degree.
It's interesting. There's loads of cool stuff like that. Like dogs are better. Dogs now are still evolving to have more expressive faces. I think they're evolving the little doggy eyebrow.
Yeah.
So that we can understand their faces better. It's cool.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
Good story.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yes. So if we can somehow figure out which dogs are, because there's like varying degrees of social ability with newborns, but if dog breeders can figure out which dogs are more social, I guess you can charge more for that. I guess that's all that's come of this, really.
Probably capitalism getting in there.
I know.
Charge more for it.
How can we profit off of this?
Tell you what, I would love to be able to create some kind of justification in my line of work to spend time with over 300 golden retriever baby puppies.
Right?
I think Emily is one.
I would not want to be the lab tech, though. Imagine having to clean up after that many puppies.
Oh, no.
375.
Yeah, I know. That's so many.
The place would smell.
Would smell awful, right? How much newspaper you got to put down, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many cans of air freshener?
Just
on the daily.
All you need to do is just hang the little air freshener trees that you get for cars, right? Yeah. Hang them around each puppy's neck.
Or on the tail.
And on the tail as well.
It can be written on it. The name can be there.
Yeah, just replace a collar with one of those. Perfect.
Anyway, that's my story. Nice, short and sweet.
Fantastic story.
Beautiful.
Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great.
Oh, it's my story.
Corey, your turn.
It's my turn. So my story is short and sweet. I just thought it was an interesting thing. So, you guys know what antibiotic resistance is, don't you?
Yes. It
Yes.
is
Aware of
where
it. We've talked about it briefly.
biotics, biology, what are they called? Bacteria, build up an ability to fight off the ways that antibiotics work.
Yeah. So we use antibiotics to, get rid of bacteria in our bodies and on stuff, I suppose, sometimes if you're using in the lab. But really, we use them when we're feeling ill. We take antibiotics. They knock you out for a few days, and they also kill all the bacteria. And the thing is that the reason that you get ill when you take antibiotics is because you've got bacteria in your body, which, are also affected by the antibiotics.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is that antibiotic resistance is a really big problem that we're facing because if we have no antibiotics to fight the bacteria, then there are some really nasty diseases that are gonna run wild. And we've got like sort of different levels of antibiotics. So not all antibiotics work on all bacteria, but we've got the sort of different levels. So there's sort of the last resort ones, which are like the nuclear option.
Yeah.
Recently, in the past few months, I was on 2 sets of antibiotics, both of which are like high tier antibiotics. Like you can't go out in the sun.
Oh my
They will
goodness.
yellow your teeth.
Wow.
They're awful. But they only give them out when they're really, really worried because like we do not want bacteria being resistant to these ones, and especially ones that we use for when people are really, really, really ill for the really bad diseases. So antibiotic resistance is something that we really, really want to avoid because otherwise at some point it's just going to be a case of going back to the time before we had antibiotics. Like, oops, you've got this bacterial disease. Write your will. Goodbye.
We haven't discovered any new antibiotics for a while, have we?
I think it's a slow going process.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of antibiotics actually come from, I think, fungi, which produce them naturally to take out bacteria. Yeah. I mean, there are other ways of there could be other ways of sort of dealing with bacteria, but ultimately antibiotics are our best tool, but overuse of them makes them essentially not work. Yeah. And that's because bacteria develop the genes to deal with it. So bacteria, if you take them all out with antibiotics, even if you leave a couple of them, they could then sort of those ones that are resistant, it's kind of like natural selection in that sense. So if you use antibiotics and you leave a few bacteria, and they start dividing, then you've got a whole colony of bacteria that are resistant to the antibiotics that you sort of initially used against them. And the reason that this is important to understand, like how sort of antibiotic resistance works, is because this study has just come out. It actually was published on the 7th of June, where they did a study to see how antibiotic resistance sort of was changed based on people traveling. So there's this thing where if you travel to different places, you can actually gain bacteria in your body that have resistance to certain antibiotics.
Right.
Yeah.
Through what? The water or through fruit?
So I'll explain it in a second. So the thing is that essentially they looked at Dutch travelers traveling to different places, and the mechanism by which you gain this, like I said, bacteria develop sort of through sort of natural selection. They develop the genes to deal with certain antibiotics. Now bacteria have this sort of way of transmitting genetic material between them. So it's not our way of transmitting genetic material between us. Is you get a male and you get a female. And then you make them and then like you've got an offspring.
Wait, I've never heard. Have you heard about this?
Look, we'll talk about this
we
later.
Haven't had the talk yet.
Okay.
We'll have the talk in a bit.
It'll take me too long to understand. I know what's going on here.
But then you produce an offspring which has a combination of your genetic material, right?
I thought they came from Amazon. That's what Jeff Bezos
Some of them do come from the Amazon, Luke, but only if that's where they're made.
I guess I'm easily confused.
So bacteria can't do this, right? Bacteria, as we know, they go through asexual reproduction. They just basically divide and copy their genes to make an exact copy of themselves, more or less. But what they can do is send genes to each other, sort of horizontally. We call it horizontal genes transfer. Essentially, they take some of their genes. They're like, hey, you're a bacteria. I'm a bacteria. Do you want some of my genes? And the other bacteria is like, yeah, I'll take some of your genes. So now this bacteria has got the antibiotic resistance that the other bacteria had, which is great for bacteria because it means that they don't need to, if you've got a few bacteria sort of living, together, say in your gut, they could be sharing genes all around. Like, here's some genes for this, here's some genes for that. But the issue is...
That's socialism for you.
Yeah, well, no. Bacteria are communists, sure. The issue with this is that if you've got sort of bacteria in your gut that are resistant to certain antibiotics and other sort of pathogenic ones which you don't want to be resistant to antibiotics, they can share that resistance. And in different places in the world, sort of particularly in parts of Africa and Asia, there are different genes in the bacteria there that are resistant to different sort of antibiotics. So if you travel there, you can, if you travel there, there are bacteria like everywhere, bear in mind, everywhere. So if you travel to a place where there's sort of different sort of genetic potentials for antibiotic resistance, and you start eating the food from there, you start being there for a while, soon enough, some of those bacteria will end up in your gut. They'll start transferring genes to each other. And essentially that antibiotic resistance of that area will be transferred to you, and then you come back home and you've got that, and you can spread that around, which is just another mechanism of the spread of antibiotic resistance without even having to use lots of antibiotics.
So if you pick that up, if you go to another country and then you come back to your country and you get a bacterial infection, can you then pass that antibacterial resistance to local bacteria?
I mean, I don't know how. So based on this, I don't know how well it transfers out into the population. It's not. You don't need to get an infection. By the way, it's just bear in mind, you don't need to be infected to get this antibacterial the antibiotic resistance. You just need to have the bacteria like exist in you, which you don't need to be infected. Bear in mind, we know about the microbiome. There are bacteria in and on you all the time.
Yeah.
So just being in a place, eating the food and all that, yeah, you can get it. Bringing it back, I don't know based on this paper how well the transfer happens sort of like from you to your environment. But I think the issue is more that within the population, essentially, right? Within the population of that place, the antibiotic resistance starts to increase. So they basically looked at individuals in the Netherlands. And they got about 2001 people that were traveling to different countries, a select sort of few countries, and they had them take a fecal swab before they went away, and then after they came back. So they had to be gone for more than a week, but less than 3 months. And they found that there were increases in antibiotic resistance based on the areas that they went to. So there were certain sort of genes that they saw let's say if a certain group went to this particular sort of part of Africa, they saw the same sort of genes that were increasing after all the people came back from that area of Africa. So there are different kinds of, essentially what they've taken from this is that there are different kinds of antibiotic resistance that are sort of endemic to different areas, that are present in different areas, and by visiting those areas for a sort of extended period, you can pick up that resistance and essentially just carry that with you now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
It's cool.
Not good for you.
But it's
though.
not good. It's not good.
Oh, wait, is it not?
No, this is... you don't want to be resistant to
I
antibiotics.
thought you meant like adapt to it. As in like
Well, I
become
suppose-
stronger.
It does kind of sound like then your body will be resistant to antibiotics.
Yeah.
Anything you pick up won't be.
Anything you pick up, anything you pick
as
up
well.
will, yeah. Yeah.
Even later on when you come back.
Get it.
Yeah, and when you've come back, yeah. So they tested before they went. They tested before they went, and then they tested when they'd come back. So this wasn't just while they were in this area. This was when they'd come back. So yeah, essentially there are now bacteria in their body that are harboring those genes for certain sort of antimicrobial resistance. And yeah, it's not the best. This is. The conclusions of this is basically they've kind of said this is what happens. We've noticed these particular areas, but ultimately this is just another mechanism of increasing antibiotic resistance that we need to watch out for. The other being obviously eating a lot of meat, right? Eating sort of a lot of low quality meat, because what they do with meat is they pump up, say, the cows with antibiotics because they're keeping them in such awful conditions that they're just going to get ill. You may as well just pump them full of antibiotics. But then they're full of bacteria that are resistant to those antibiotics, and that can spread when you eat the meat, all of that sort of stuff. It's really just we're overusing antibiotics right now, and even traveling around the world, we're spreading this resistance. So essentially, be worried, I guess.
Oh.
No,
I don't want to be worried.
You've got to be a little bit worried.
I'm already worried enough.
Be wary, then. Don't be worried, be wary.
Get
wary.
an anxiety disorder. All of you.
Stay alert.
That's probably a better disorder to get, rather than,
Overconfidence.
well, I was going to say a bacterial infection.
Okay. Yeah, 'cause
Yeah.
anxiety isn't resistant to antibacteria. It's certainly resistant to SSRIs.
Yeah, exactly. No, seriously though, with this, essentially, there's not much that I guess individuals can do other than being cautious when taking antibiotics. If you're going to the doctor and the doctor's like, okay, just take this, maybe be like, is there any other, ask if there's any other sort of avenue, really. But yeah, it's just something to be aware of, that antibiotic resistance is a thing. And it can spread between different areas. If you want to reduce it, maybe eat less meat. Don't just take antibiotics for anything, and finish your full course of antibiotics whenever you've got them. Even if you feel better, you need to finish the course, because otherwise you're just leaving some bacteria there that that are going to be resistant.
dear.
You're personally destroying humanity if you don't finish your antibacterial course.
You're to blame.
Yeah, you are to blame.
Yep.
Look, what's your story for us this week?
My story is somewhat of a PSA and also a bit of a philosophical discussion, so I'd love you guys' input. I found this best summed up by the Financial Times, who wrote, England's NHS is preparing to scrape the medical histories of 55 million patients into a database it will share with third parties. Have you guys heard about this?
I've not.
I hadn't heard about this until Luke, you messaged me saying, can I do this for my story?
Yeah, well, this is the problem, as I always clear everything with Corey, so he has heard about this. But before, you hadn't, and this is the point, right? So, if you're not familiar with this, basically, GP practices, which in England are your doctors, and it's also in Scotland, but this is not happening in Scotland, thanks, Nicola. Woo woo.
Go Scotland!
Those are your GP surgeries, right? And they were instructed with 6 weeks' notice to hand over their patients' entire medical histories. And this is called
What?
Jam's incredible shot
What?
here. Yes. So this is called the General Practice Data for Planning and Research Data Collection. Very catchy name. And NHS Digital says it will improve the health and care services, planning and preventing spread of disease, help with research, and for analysing treatments. It doesn't include your name, but it does include your NHS number, which is linked to your name.
Which is basically your name.
Your date of birth and other information. Now, all this will go through what is called a pseudo-anonymizing process. which is not the same as anonymizing data because it can still be turned back into your personal data by the NHS. So this understandably has been met with an awful lot of scandal, especially because it's been given 6 weeks notice. You individually, if you want to opt out of this, have had until the 23rd of June, which was not a very long time. And it passes over all sorts of information like your physical and mental health, your sexual health, your drug and alcohol history, your family and work problems, all the stuff that basically you might share with a GP expecting this is a confidential relationship that you have. Many people have the same doctor for years and years. They have family doctor. They build up a trusting relationship. And it turns out that GPs are now being asked to hand over all of this information into a centralized database, which then may be shared with, will be shared with commercial partners, not necessarily bad ones, but there's also no limit.
I thought you were going to say there's no good one necessarily. Well, there's just less bad ones.
So basically, it doesn't have any legal guarantees that it won't be shared with companies or like medical insurance companies or that kind of thing. But also, there's no plan right now that will be the case. But as you know, we've become used to, there's lots of things our government says won't be the case and then turns out are the case. For example,
selling off the NHS.
Sure. Right. So there's also been no public awareness campaign for this. And until the recent complaints, which have managed to push the deadline back, although the kind of when the deadline actually is a little bit up in the air. The deadline for GP surgeries is the start of September, I believe, but then the deadline for you as a person to tell your GP surgery might not be then.
Yeah.
And it's all opt-out only, which assumes that if you haven't heard about this, your consent is assumed that you're happy to have all this data shared into a centralized system. So, and even when you later opt out, if you fail to opt out by the date that is set, you will then opt out to future sharing, but everything they currently hold on you will be kept and can be shared forever. So this is why I wanted to talk about this, because it's a really big deal. And it has genuinely potential good benefits, but it's been handled really, really poorly. So to opt out, for example, you had to print out a form. You might not have a printer. You might not have a computer. You might not know how to use a printer. I don't know how to use a computer. Or you had to get a form and take it to your doctor. Now, that obviously rules out people who can't travel easily. It rules out people who don't have access to their doctor's surgery. Sorry, Corey.
It rules out everyone whose doctor's surgery isn't accepting any walk-ins because it's a goddamn pandemic.
That too, yes, absolutely.
Jesus.
Well, you might be able to put it through a postbox, and you can also email it. But again, there's all sorts of people for whom this is a problem. And you didn't have a particularly long time to do this in. The only sort of public awareness campaign was the NHS digital website and little flyers in doctors' surgeries where no one's going right now because there's a pandemic on. And this has also been something that was already planned. Years ago, there was already a plan like this, and it was stopped because of exactly the same problem of this pseudo-anonymizing system that doesn't really anonymize the data, right? So this is obviously an area of concern for many people, and there's legal challenges going up against it. A spokeswoman for NHS Digital said, no one will be identifiable, that it is very secure, but, it's only as secure as, we humans can make it. It's always possible that it can be hacked, and that it would only be shared by organizations that show legitimate and appropriate legal basis for their request. For now.
Sorry, no one would be identifiable. This stop me if we're going to talk about this later. No one would be identifiable.
No,
even if
they don't have the NHS number.
Even if they scrape that, right?
Okay,
so
fine.
I'm a company. I want to be studying the effects of the long-term effects of X disease in X group of people. So I have their date of birth, right? I have the date of birth of someone. I will likely have their race because that's relevant to that information is relevant.
Included, yes.
I would likely be able to find out to some degree, hopefully, where in the UK they are.
Yes, postcodes, I believe, are included.
Okay, so
maybe pseudo-anonymized, but area, yeah.
Because that's relevant to my research. Okay, so now I don't have your name, but I've got your date of birth, race, and your postcode. How many black people are living in this exact postcode with this exact birthday? You can find people from that amount of data.
Yeah.
You can find someone with someone's name online, but even just a postcode is so easy to find and single out people, especially sexual health data, you said.
Mm-hmm.
that's immediately outing every single trans person, every single person that is LGBT easily, because there are specific treatments for those groups. That is unbelievable.
So Corey's perfectly summed up the frustrations and the worries about this. Now, the other side of the argument is basically that all this kind of like drama is going to cost lives, because this sort of application of data science and the ability to sort of analyze things on a countrywide basis will hopefully lead to legitimate, better treatments and some strong insight. And actually, if this sort of thing was done properly, I personally don't have an issue with big data coming into the medical industry, because it's very important and you can find really good trends and you can find really good information. But the worrying thing for me was just the fact that we weren't being told straight up. And also there were very clear, strange things going on. So for example, the health minister, Joe Churchill, in Parliament said, patients own their data. Now, I don't know about you, Corey, do you own that iPad?
Hey.
You didn't say no, that I couldn't take it. Champ, would you like an iPad?
Oh, I would love an iPad.
Just so you know, someone owns that iPad.
Okay.
That is someone's iPad.
It isn't. I don't need to know who.
No, you don't. I'm not going to tell you who, but someone owns that iPad.
Yeah,
you use that to your heart's content.
But that iPad has a lot of things on it that can tell you who it belongs to.
And you own it, Corey.
And
That's
it's
the
mine.
thing. You own it. And it's yours.
Can I have it back now?
No, we're going to keep that, but everything that you buy in the future, we won't take.
Oh, so like my phone. I've just bought this.
No, that's an old phone. That's ours.
I want...
You already had that. You already had that.
If you buy anything new, we won't take it.
Right.
Now that you've told us you don't want us to.
Right, that's...
But before you told us, you gave consent to everything.
I suppose that's fair.
No, it's not.
I like my iPad.
Give me my iPad back.
And it's just, to me, it's the kind of the really important thing here is the definition of ownership is one of the things governments exist for, to enforce private property rights. So when there's somebody standing up and saying you own your data, but then I don't personally feel like saying you own something and having an opt-out system are compatible things. I understand the importance of an opt-out system, but don't then also tell me that I own something. It's like an opt-out system, for example, is in place for your organs after you die. And I wouldn't claim ownership of my organs after I am dead. And I would happily give over my rights to my organs.
So the fact is that usually with an opt-out system, it should be something that doesn't actually, it has no negative impact on you. If there's something that can easily have a negative impact, it should be opt-in, because you should be aware of the risks before choosing to do it. Like with this opt-out system, with this kind of data, essentially what you're doing is saying, we want everyone to do this, and we know that if we made it opt-out, that is a barrier for people to cross, which means fewer people will want to cross that barrier, which means we'll have way more data. It's just a really shady way of doing it. And obviously, as well, having to print it out, having to take it in, that is going to very negatively impact specific groups of people who have less access to the internet, have less access to printers, can't necessarily go to see their GP when it's open because they need to work during the day. All of these things
just don't have time.
Well, that's the thing.
Some people don't have time.
No, genuinely, this time thing negatively, specifically impacts people who are poorer, who are working class, because they have less time to do things, because you've got more time work, you can't pay for childcare, all of these things. So it's really, really kind of disgusting to me that this has started off on this foot, because the worry with this data is that it can very easily be used to discriminate against groups of people, and the way that the data is being collected is inherently already discriminatory against specific groups of people.
I just don't get how they can say consent is assumed.
Yeah,
when people don't know, isn't that a part of consent?
Yeah, there's not even okay, maybe you could assume consent if you sent a leaflet to every house in the country, maybe. Because then you've given everyone... No, I'm not saying that's necessarily true. But that is the bare minimum that you have informed... Because that's the thing, is that it's not only just that people might have time to go to the doctor's surgery, or that there might be barriers to going to the doctor's surgery. They might not even have time to read loads of news articles or have interest in things like this, because they just don't have time. People have... single parents have no time a lot of the time. And it's just insane to me.
Can I just point out how poorly this was spread? So for anyone that doesn't understand sort of the NHS website, I'm on it constantly because I'm very
You're
ill.
researching.
I'm very ill. No, I'm researching for Sci Guys. But I promise you, no one is going to the NHS website's homepage and then looking through there. Everyone that goes to basically everyone that goes to the NHS website is going specifically for the problem that they have and have searched for, or are going to a certain portal that they have got to go through for whatever whatever access
reason.
to the information they need.
Yeah.
Very few people are going to the NHS homepage to look to see what is there.
Yeah.
So saying we've put it on the NHS homepage is like saying, oh, we put a sign up in the middle of nowhere. Some people drive past it every now and then.
Also, by the way, I don't believe it was the NHS homepage. I believe it was the NHS digital website.
Oh.
Yes. Yes. It was on the And also, crucially, the other thing is, if I steal your iPad and give it to James, or to Jamp, and I say to you, does Corey know? You ask me, does Corey know? And I say, no, I haven't told him.
Yeah.
But I wrote on my website that I gave it to you. So if Corey wants to know where his iPad is, then he can check my website.
That's a pain. That is ridiculous.
God, you should check my website more.
I've been very negative on this. On the other hand, right, and I've my worries for this obviously are the data being used, but is the data being used improperly? Is the data being used to discriminate? Data being used to find out information about certain people? Because ultimately, like I said, and I'm going to go slightly deeper into this because there's something else I haven't realized. They say they'll only give it to certain companies, right, or to certain groups.
Yeah.
That kind of data could be very, very, very useful for people wanting to advertise certain products. And obviously, they probably won't necessarily give it to advertisers straight away. But there's nothing saying that they won't give it to someone that might use it for some kind of marketing down the line, or that one company that is studying this thing won't use it in a different department to market something else, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know because I've not been given this information. I don't know what the rules about it are. But that kind of really really personal data can be used so. It can be very useful, but it can be used so terribly. That's why you shouldn't be giving your DNA away to those companies for the same reason, that they can sell that data and target things to you in a way that you might not want to be targeted. But on the other hand, that amount of data on everyone in the UK is an incredible tool. Incredible.
Yes.
Yeah.
We could do huge, massive studies for decades at a time. So let's say off the top of my head, we've got these issues with people saying, oh, we don't have long-term studies of how hormones affect trans people. There you go. Immediately, you can have a fairly broad, but a long-term study of every single trans person in the UK, and you can have rates of this, rates of that, rates of complications, anything you want over X period of time. That would be incredible. But the issue is, who is going to be using it? Unless there are incredibly strict rules on who's using it and for what purpose, that data can be used for incredible good, but can also be used for incredible harm. So it's like,
Yeah. This is the thing about it, is that this sort of treatment of data, the sort of centralization of data for large data projects and sort of data mining is, I would argue, inevitable, because it is the absolutely, you can make the case that the costs outweigh the benefits, outweigh the costs, right? You can make the case, and also it will happen in some countries somewhere, and you've got this issue where you've got to keep up in the world in terms of healthcare. It will happen probably in America. It will happen probably definitely in China. And so it is inevitable to a certain extent and will produce incredible benefits. And there's no way that I think this is not going to have incredible results. Like you're saying, like it's an absolute goldmine in terms of producing better healthcare. But you need to do it very carefully. You need to do it very honestly. And actually, if you as a government are somewhat tyrannical and want to be a little bit honest about, well, the line between what is yours and what isn't yours, this data is being produced by the GPs. It's not being produced by you. If you want to come out and say, well, actually, the public good is more important than your individual right, come out and say that. If that's what you think, come out and say it. But don't do this thing where you sort of gaslight the public on the definition of ownership, and as the government in the House of Commons, and then expect nothing to happen. The outcome of this, by the way, is that it has been delayed, like I said, until I believe the start of September. I will, if this ends up being a clip, I will leave a link in the description for how you can do an opt-out if you have very personal data you don't want shared into a centralized database and then potentially to anyone, even though it will be pseudo-anonymized. But yeah, I just really wanted to cover this because it is a big deal, and I feel like I was incredibly shocked when even Corey hadn't heard about this. Not any hit on Corey. It's just how poor of an information campaign or how deliberate a disinformation campaign this has been.
It came up on my Twitter feed after you mentioned it. Maybe I hadn't been paying attention to it beforehand, but it came up on my Twitter feed about twice since you've mentioned it. 2 or 3 times in the past sort of maybe week or so. And that's not very much for this. I mean, think about what was happening when what was it? The whole sort of net neutrality thing. That was everywhere for weeks and weeks and weeks. And this is a sort of similar level of this is a similar level of sort of event. And another thing that has just come to my mind is this data won't be clean. Right, so this is what's frustrating for me. The government has shown over the past year and a bit that they have no idea how to handle anything to do with science. Harsh, but honestly, I think fair. They have consistently put themselves before scientific advice, and I don't think that the government can be trusted necessarily to deal with this data in an effective way. I don't know who's going to be choosing who can use the data or whatnot, but I don't think it can be used. I don't know if the government can do this effectively, especially considering, like I said, this data won't be clean. What I mean by that is that every single person in the UK, let's say, has every single person. We're dealing with every single person in the UK. We're not dealing with a controlled study with a set parameters and set sort of people running the experiment. We're dealing with however many GPs there are in the UK, however many misdiagnosed. Like there's things go misdiagnosed. You know, some people are sort of not taken as seriously because of their weight, because of their race, XYZ. There are so many different factors, so many different variables involved here in how this data is collected that it may not necessarily even be comparable. And people that are taking this data, and I'm sure there are people that are much smarter than me dealing with this data, but I'm also aware that scientists are not infallible, and there may very well be people who have conclusions that they want to prove and will use this data ineffectively, despite knowing that it's not necessarily the cleanest of data, to come to those conclusions. And it just worries me to an extent that we have a lot of data, but it is not necessarily, like I said, clean. It is messy, and it can be used to push a conclusion that may not be actually apparent in the data. That is, oh gosh. Conceptually, this is a great idea. If we had set parameters for gathering this data, if we had set parameters for using this data, if we had only a specific groups that were able to access this data, or it was fully anonymized entirely, and it was open source, anyone could use it, then okay, all of that would be understandable. I could probably get behind that. But this sort of shady, we're taking all of this privately collected data and selling it off to, we don't know who yet, but you can trust us. They'll be okay. That to me is just like, oh God. Oh, don't like it.
You wanted to opt out. You should have done your due diligence. You should have some personal responsibility.
Your consent is assumed from birth.
Yes. Oh, from birth?
Yes.
So this affects children as well?
Jesus Christ. That's the chat are talking about that, and that is true. It's in my research. Yes, consent is assumed from birth. So you're a baby and you have GP appointment or ID shared.
Parents can opt out.
Parents can opt out for their children.
How long do they have to do that?
You reach age 18 and you've had 18 years of your medical data shared with the government, and there's nothing you can do about it. If you say, I don't want that anymore, they keep all that data and they just stop getting more.
See, again, if this was fully anonymized, and obviously that would limit the use of the data, not having areas and whatnot, but well, actually, if it was anonymized in the sense, this is kind of the sort of pseudo anonymization that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Is that a case of, like, let's say it's, as an example, sort of encrypted in that you can give out the data and no one can figure it out one way, but say the government has the key to, okay, that...
So it can be, the NHS only can de-anonymize the data. So in order to work out who you are individually. But I believe that, I don't want to say too much because it was all a little confusing, but I believe some area of information is kept, possibly even postcode information. I'm not certain.
I think that could be, I mean, that data could definitely be useful. I just think that who has access to it is incredibly important, I think. You know?
Is it just anyone who can buy it?
Well,
crucially, it is not for sale in a sale sense. However, there is a price list on the NHS digital website, but that is a price list for covering the costs of getting the information. So yeah, businesses and universities do have to pay to access it, but it's not a sort of for-profit scheme according to NHS Digital.
Do you have to give them like the reason why you want the info? Or?
Yes, so you have to pass a lot of tests, and you have to show a legitimate legal requirement and have like legitimate reason for accessing the data.
Yeah,
but it still is, yes, data can be bought, and it's, you know. And like I say, there are assertions that we won't be selling this to insurance companies or anything like this, but these, you know, you don't know what happens over the years. It's not like this data is being created with a future tyrannical government in mind. It is you're trusting possible future governments.
This is something that that I heard the other day, is that with a lot of policies, with a lot of things that come into law, there's almost in no sense any good, entirely wholly good law that can't be, or policy that can't be misused by the wrong people. So like, look, as you said, this is not necessarily, this is being brought in with the understanding that people have good intentions. The current government has good intentions with it, and it can't be misused. But like you said, if some future tyrannical government were to come into power, then that is a lot of data that they legally have access to, and can very easily.
They can also just pass laws to make it legal.
Yeah, you could pass a law to make it legal to give it to whoever. Yeah. That is and the thing is, that is a much easier jump than this is the big hurdle here. Getting that all of that data ready to be shipped off to people that legally are, like, you know, have a reason for using it, but getting all that data ready to be packaged up and given to whoever wants to use it. That is the hardest step here. If you were just to change down the line, oh hey, maybe we should broaden the legal, you broaden the legal sort of requirements for accessing it.
Yeah,
and that might be easier to get through. That might not have to be let's opt into that. It might already be built into the opt-ins. It might already be built into the situation now, wherein the government reserves the right to change who has access to it without actually having to notify anyone. I don't know. I'm not trying to sort of spread fear here or fearmonger. But what I'm saying is that because all of this information has been kept quite hush-hush, yeah, it's been available on the NHS digital website, but because this information isn't super readily available, there's not been an information campaign, we don't know this. These are the questions that you should be asking, and you should go to the NHS digital website and find out the answer to those questions. And if you can't find the answers to those questions, that is something to bear in mind when deciding whether or not to opt out. What do you guys think you'll do? Will you opt in? Will you opt out?
I've already put in a request to opt out and had it confirmed.
Interesting.
Just because.
I'm gonna do the same.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've discussed very personal things with my GPs over the years. I don't trust that. I don't want to have to constantly keep up with who's the minister for health and what they're like and what friends they have and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think it's just safer not to. And it feels, you know, the pressure will be, well, that's selfish. You got to pitch in to give all the data to make the NHS better. But I don't feel comfortable or safe. And the other thing I will say though is that I do actually know someone very high up in NHS Digital. And he's a flippin' lovely man. And I don't think he has any bad intentions with this at all. I think the intentions on this, at least from the NHS side, probably even from the government side, giving him a bit of a slack, is good for now. But it doesn't mean it stays good. It doesn't mean that data is not decodable for any possible bad actors. It could be that 2 years, 3 years down the line, with the aging population, we're told, well, actually the NHS is at breaking point, and we need other ways to fund that. So we're going to sell to corporations for large amounts of money, and you don't have to pay as much tax. And everyone goes, woo, less tax. Funding it through private corporations, yes, make them pay for the NHS, and it can be spun like that. It's not necessarily the case, and I definitely don't think it's the case, but that's the kind of stuff. When creating data sets, you need to be thinking about the worst case scenario for the use of that data set.
Yeah, this is the thing. This is when this is why census data is so important, and people can be worried about it, and why whenever they're doing the census, they make it very clear this is how this data can be used, and this is how it can't be used. Because, I mean, medical, you might not think about your medical history and how much you can tell from it, but I mean, the LGBT thing is just one. People with any kind of disability, things like that, all of these things can make it very, very easy to oppress people, which
Absolutely.
and it's and this might sound sort of, I mean, hysterical almost, but I'm being fully serious here. This kind of data can be used to do incredible harm and incredible good.
Yeah,
but also incredible harm.
If there's some future super transphobic government,
well, some current,
more so than now.
You think you're going to opt out, Jemp?
I think so, yeah.
Corey?
Yeah.
I'm going to have to read into it properly to have... right now, based on what I know, I'm feeling opt out. But if I read it and it convinces me, then I could potentially opt in. But right now, I'm a for sure opting
someone
out.
in chat's already opted out.
Yeah.
I think people are figuring out how to do it now.
Yeah, we'll probably put this up as a clip because it's quite an important subject, and I will include a bunch of stuff in the description about how to opt out if that's what you feel, and information. Just don't just opt out because we're worried. Just go and do some reading. It doesn't take long. You can read, all the resources are in the description when this goes out as a clip, about all my sources, many different articles from the left, the right, the center, all sorts, and just have a think. There may be things you discuss with your doctor which you don't necessarily want Matt Hancock having the ability to decode. Not that he necessarily would individually have access to this. But that's the thing as well. You also have to trust every person with access to it.
Yes.
It's you got to think about these things in the worst case scenario, like people spying on people they know, and
people. I mean, people have
the NSA have this. There was stuff in America with people like spying on people having sex or getting changed through webcams, all sorts of stuff.
Then the kind of like and. I'm sure there's stories of guys that have, and I say guys because it's usually guys that have access to certain information and use it to. I mean, there's stories of policemen I've heard having access to certain information and using it to hit on women,
to stalk people,
or to stalk women.
There's a story this week about I think it's this week about a Apple repair center. You have to send in your passcode for have your iPhone repaired, and two or three repair people shared explicit photos from a student's iPhone on her Facebook page.
Obviously.
Yeah. What the hell?
Yeah.
What?
People, and this is, we can think about the big companies that have access to it, but obviously there are individuals, and you need to trust that there are sufficient sort of safeguards in place for the individuals that have access to it. Because while we say, oh, the NHS are the only ones that will be able to decode that information.
Yeah.
The NHS is big. Who in the NHS will have access to that? How many people? What is the number of people? What department? What safeguards are there in place to stop them from accessing that information without reason or sharing it? Because all it takes is one leak, as well.
Yeah, it's true.
One leak. The number of times passwords are leaked happens often. It takes one singular leak, the weakest link in that entire sort of system needs to be broken, and all that data can go.
Because when leaks happen, it's not just like one password or whatever. It's always like a big load of them. Yeah. Bunch.
And you could say that this is the issue, right? The encryption on the data could be the strongest in the world, but if someone's password is password and they have access to it, then that is the weakest link, and that's what we need to worry about.
Yeah.
So again, we're not saying, as Luke said, we're not saying opt out because we're worried. Look into it yourself, but make sure and ask yourself all of these questions, because they're very important.
Do your own research.
Very good story, Luke. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, that was very good.
Anything else to
I learned
add?
a lot.
No,
No?
no.
Good? Good
No.
story.
But that is my iPad now. I hope you know.
No, it's mine.
No, well, yes, exactly.
It has my name on it.
Exactly.
But it's
So does your NHS account. Thank you very much.
You gave consent by
So-
existing.
When you were born.
moving on quickly, so hopefully I can keep my iPad. We've got some polls for everyone.
Until September 1st.
We've got we have some polls. So we asked everyone on Twitter. We asked you a question about an episode we did. The question was, have you ever sleepwalked before? So interestingly, these numbers are pretty cool.
Oh my god.
24% said yes, and 76% said no. So a quarter of people said they had sleepwalked, which is, I think, not too far off.
I think that was about right.
That's
Wasn't
about
it?
right,
It was
yeah.
about 20%ish.
Yeah, it was about 20%, about 1/5 of people. Yeah, so it's not too far off. And we've looked at Instagram, it's slightly higher. So 30% of people said yes, and 70% of people said no.
Ooh.
I actually ran this same poll on my own Instagram account when
Yeah.
I was promoting the show, and I had 32% yes, 68% no. So if you follow me, you're 2% more likely to sleepwalk than if you just follow Sci Guys.
Interesting.
Follow now for a sleepwalking fun.
No, hold on, that's not how it works.
Yes,
If
it
I
is.
follow you,
That's
do
what
I
the
gain
data
the
says.
ability?
Yeah, that's 2% chance.
sick. 2% chance.
1 in 50.
Following Luke doesn't make you
Yeah,
more
it does.
likely to sleepwalk.
It does.
Yeah.
God.
I might think about following you now.
Correlation, not causation.
Correlation and causation are the same thing. What are you talking about? No, we've so those are the polls. Now I also asked people what happened while they sleepwalked. So while you all are getting your questions in for the Q&A, so I start asking some questions now. I'll read out some stories of people that were sleepwalking. Shall I?
Yes.
Yeah.
Please do.
So we have a few here. So let's look to Twitter first. Let's see what we've got. One person, when they were 5, walked downstairs, sat in front of the TV whilst fully asleep, and just started laughing, and then walked back upstairs.
That is eerie.
Some poltergeist stuff.
If that is eerie, there's an eerie one here. Someone said, I fell asleep in my grandparents' living room and woke up in the middle of the night standing over their bed. I was uncomfortable with myself for a while after that one. Yeah. Are there any questions coming in?
Ooh, are there any questions coming in, Jam?
So far, what is the cause of scoliosis?
Bad back.
Big one.
Isn't that the definition of scoliosis as
Yeah.
opposed to the cause?
No, look, this is the thing. Scoliosis
Is a symptom.
It's self-defining.
Scoliosis, I always get mixed up with the other one, the skin one.
Scurvy.
No, there's scoliosis and a skin psoriasis.
Psoriasis.
And I always get them mixed up. Never know which
Begins
one's
with a
which.
P.
Yeah.
That's how you tell.
Well, no, because if I'm hearing them,
Ah.
I can't hear the P.
Well, listen harder.
Apparently, my aunt used to sleepwalk and she used to wake up lying in the bathtub, says Charlotte.
Oh,
Just wanted a bath.
very interesting. Wait, lying in the bathtub.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
This is interesting.
Should tell the truth in the bathtub, really.
Shuka says, in Switzerland, we had a vote on banning synthetic pesticides. Any opinions on this? Specifically, Corey, what do you think?
Look, here's the thing. I think that people go too hard on organic versus synthetic very often. For example, I was watching this great vegan YouTuber.
Me.
No.
Yep.
Who said
Yourself.
who said something along the lines yes who said something along the lines of like, oh, go for this because you got to go for organic soy because that's the only way you know it's not GMOs. And I'm like, GMOs are fine, GMOs are good. Synthetic pesticides could be good. It depends on how they're used, I think. But yeah, I mean, that's my opinion, that just because something is synthetic, it doesn't inherently mean it's less harmful than something that's not synthetic.
Yeah, it's like you could make the argument that anybody from anybody who lives in the UK, for example, eating an avocado is unnatural, right? Because it's not from an area of the world where you are.
Yeah.
And so like the kind of boundary we draw with natural versus unnatural is entirely arbitrary. Now, obviously, synthetic things aren't natural, but that doesn't, like Corey's saying, equate to bad or bad for you. And there are some natural things that are bad for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have they eaten cyanide? Bad for you. Not synthetic. Bad for you.
Absolutely. The thing look, here's the thing. I think that there could be, I feel like there are certain issues with synthetic pesticides but they're sitting in the back of my mind and I can't quite put my finger on them. So if there are specific issues with synthetic pesticides, then that's perfectly fine to ban them. But yeah, as Luke said, just because something's synthetic doesn't mean that it's inherently no bueno.
I like this conversation where Corey said that, and then I said as Corey said that, and then Corey said as Luke said that. Jam, would you like to say anything?
As Corey and Luke have said that.
Yeah.
Thank you. And now as I've said that.
That's because I can't actually remember anything like before.
That you just said.
Before 20 seconds before, it's gone.
Very short buffer time.
Yeah. I'll only remember this episode once we finished. During it, no idea what's going on.
Yeah, that's what me and Jamp always say, but you beat us up for it.
No. That's because that's because you guys don't remember it at all.
Have we been doing this show forever? Because I can't remember the beginning.
Honestly, yeah, we could have been. Yeah. So, any more questions we got there? Let's see.
I saw a question about animal behavior.
Oh yeah, do you think animals change their behavior when they know they're being watched?
Some of them do. Squirrels do that. Squirrels will, if they feel like they're being watched, will pretend to bury nuts and then go and bury their nuts somewhere else.
I have heard of that.
Yeah.
That's
some animals do change their behavior if they think they're being watched.
Because they think, they're going to think I'm putting my nuts here, but not really.
Yeah. No, not
Psych.
really. Tricked that squirrel. Yeah. No, so some animals do.
I'll tell you a really
Very
interesting thing on a tangent from that, very tangentially from that. There was a guest on another podcast that I love, No Such Thing as a Fish, a few weeks ago called Ella Al-Shamahi, who did like a book on handshakes and the history of handshakes.
Ooh.
And there was a story she was telling about this tribe who an anthropologist went out, and the tribe supposedly sort of shared this information that one of their customs was that when a neighboring tribe arrived, one of the tribes had to shake the penis of every member of the other tribe, shake the member of every other member of the tribe, if you would. But she was also like, I kind of maybe get the feeling that these tribes just like an anthropologist turns up and they're like, this is what we do every time.
Yeah.
This is one of our customs, because they're just fucking with them. Because they're these weird white people who come over from another country and watch them intently.
It's like what Australians do with drop bears.
What?
Do you know?
No.
Right, so there's this mythical creature called a drop bear.
Oh yeah.
Drops down, it exists in Australia, and they drop down from trees and they attack your face. And if you go to Australia, every Australian will tell you that this is true, but it's not. I'm sorry, Australians. I'm giving it away. It's not true. They don't exist.
Amazing.
But everyone is in on this joke. And if you see a tourist, you tell them about drop bears.
Yeah, I thought this was true for a long time.
Really? Oh man.
I mean, it's Australia. A bear that drops down and attacks your face is not.
But that's the exact stereotype they're playing on, Corey.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Your belief that Australia is just overrun by rabid animals.
look, all you need, a drop bear is essentially a koala that
is evil.
Face-eating koala.
a koala that will attack you.
Yeah.
That is not unbelievable. You know, that's like telling everyone, oh, there's a fish in Scotland that I don't know, will jump out and slap you in the face. Sure, whatever. Fish do that. You know, if you're swimming, they'll hit you. Whatever. It's a believable thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next thing you're going to tell me is quokkas aren't real, which would break my heart.
Oh, I love a quokka. Yeah.
Mythical. Not real.
Realistic.
Yeah.
Actually, true. Yeah.
No, not real.
Scotland does a similar thing, though. We tell people that haggis is an animal because it is. They've got one set of legs shorter than the other. So the legs on their left-hand side are shorter than the legs on their right-hand side, so they can run around the mountains, right? And the males and females have different legs.
Sides.
Different
So they
sides.
meet each other.
Yeah, so that they can face each other. Because otherwise they wouldn't be able to face each
Like
other.
snails that rotate in one direction.
Yeah.
And you have to find the right rotation snail to mate.
And that's where haggis comes from. That's what
But
haggis
that's
is.
not true.
But it is true.
But the snail thing is true, but that's not
But the
true.
haggis is true also.
No, that's not true.
No, they do, really.
Well,
No.
that's not true.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Prove me wrong.
I'm also Scottish.
If you were Scottish, you would know that.
Oh, okay, fine. I reneged my citizenship.
Thoughts about the idea to legalize psychedelic drugs for psychotherapy?
Well, there's plenty of very good evidence that it works. It's something they're in the sort of beginning stages of proving, although it's been tried over many, many years. They just have to work out the safety of it all. But yes, I mean, I think it's incredibly exciting. We're well overdue a kind of revolution in psychiatry and psychology. And I think personally, having read about it a lot for this show and out of interest, I think it's the next frontier because it enables your brain to rewrite in the way that isn't normal for adults.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's interesting to me is that's what many of them were initially used for. Well, that's what LSD was initially used for to an extent. And it's just baffling that we have so many things that are illegal for for certain reasons. Some governments wanted to crack down on drugs to attack certain groups without having to out and out have a law against them, and then it's got us to a situation where we can't use these in research, or we can't use these in a way that would be effective, because public opinion is kind of almost controlled by what is and is not legal. We think that legal equals moral, or legal equals good and safe, when that is not at all the case.
I was watching a program called Before We Die on Channel 4 that my friend is in. And there's this scene where police officers talking about they've brought this much of a drug into the country. And he's like so angry about this. And I was like, man, they are flipping obsessed, aren't they? They're obsessed because it doesn't even work. Making it illegal doesn't work.
No, it doesn't.
It demonstrably doesn't work. If what you're trying to do is to reduce addiction and reduce abuse of drugs, your tactic doesn't work. But it's like the church with sex. It's like a level of obsession that doesn't actually produce many results.
Yeah.
It's just there's real. It's like, I don't know. It's something about themselves, but they also they just sort of. Russell Brand was in front of the Common Select Committee a few years ago talking about drugs, and sort of because he was an addict for so many years, and he was somebody else was there as well with him talking about how we need honest education about drugs, because right now all that happens, at least in the UK, is that someone comes into school, probably for me it was in year 5 or 6, and they just go, drugs bad, really scary. If you take any psychedelics, you'll believe you will be an orange and you'll peel your own skin off.
It's true.
And then they're going, oh, well, we kind of might use them for psychotherapy as well now. Oh, but what about the orange peeling skin? No, don't remember that. Forget that now. They're good now. They've changed.
People think they can
if you have
fly,
a
they
doctor
jump
with
off
you.
buildings and stuff.
Yeah,
so
if you have a doctor with you won't feel like an orange.
Oh, is that how it works?
So long as a doctor tells you to use it, it's okay.
Yeah.
Which is, I think the way that we teach about drugs really bothers me, because heroin bad, but morphine
great.
okay.
Wonderful time.
It's fine.
Fantastic.
Doctor give you morphine, drug dealer give you heroin. No. And obviously,
there is a difference.
There's a difference.
A very big difference.
Very big difference. Very big difference. But the thing is that when you tell people this thing is bad and will kill, like, okay, so for example, right, weed. I mean, that is something that so many people use.
Bad, Corey.
But my point here is
bad.
That when you tell people, oh, this thing is bad and it will ruin your life forever and it will kill you, and then a kid tries it and they're like, hey,
exactly.
This is pretty good.
Makes you question everything. It goes, oh my God, I've been lied to.
Yeah, and they'll be like, oh man, this is good. Maybe I'll try it some more. It's the same with like masturbation. When you tell a kid you'll grow hair on your hand and you'll go blind, and they do it and they're like, hey, this is pretty good. They'll just keep on doing it. And I feel like, and this, I don't know if this is supported by data, I've not looked into it, but a sort of intuition is that marijuana as a gateway drug, it's probably because once you realize that one of them is fine, you're more likely to try other things because they might be fine too. So,
sure.
Yeah, no, but like seriously, lying is not going to help.
Yeah, because as far as I've read before, there is no pharmacological reason as to why marijuana will be a gateway drug in the way that there are for other drugs. It's just it's a thing you observe that somebody who tries marijuana. I've never thought about that, Corey. It's very interesting.
I think the data, if you look at the data, alcohol and smoking, both, you can look at those both as
gateways to each other.
Yeah, because they are things that you can be addicted to.
Yeah.
And so if you've got an addictive personality, you could start off on something that's simple and legal and easy to acquire. And then as the feelings like lessen out on those, you move on to harder stuff. But yeah, no, I think that making drugs illegal and making them seem morally reprehensible is just silly.
It just leads to bad outcomes, really.
Yeah. If you don't want people to do drugs, that's
people are going to do them anyway.
That's not the way to do it.
People are doing them anyway.
Yeah, it's like abortions. If you want people to not have abortions, stop wanting that, because they're going to do it anyway.
It's like in this Russell Brand Common Select Committee sort of testimony I was telling you about. There was this bit where this was like the most incredible moment for me, where obviously I know that there's lots of politicians who don't really understand the world, but one of these politicians was saying to Russell Brand, do you think that if drug addicts understood the conditions of the workers who make the drugs they take in, for example, Colombia, that would have an effect on them taking drugs, because they would feel, oh, this is actually hurting people? And Russell Brand was like, No.
No, obviously not.
If someone's addicted to drugs, they're going to get drugs. Doesn't matter if they're illegal. Doesn't matter if some random person in a different country, in a faraway land that they've never heard of and that they will never meet, they're addicted to drugs. And the fact that you don't understand that is insane. You're a politician and you're on a task force designed to do this. And you have... What?
You should try the drugs first. You get addicted, and then you can be on the
Then
task
try
force.
and get off
No,
them.
but really, no. I think, well, for one thing, if the people that are people that are making policy decisions about drugs should have, like, it should be informed by people who were formerly addicted to drugs. That makes sense to me.
makes sense,
But
yeah.
ultimately, as well, do you think if you found out the working conditions of the people that made it, that you would not want to do it? Do you think if you found out the working conditions of the people that make your iPhone, you wouldn't want to use it? What about literally every single thing that you own?
He said, do you think if you found
me?
he said, do you think if you found out the effect that petrol's having on the planet, you'd use less petrol? And the guy was like, oh.
No, like actually, like, and I mean, honestly, I don't think people realize that the reason drug addicts are not the reason that conditions. I want to say I can't find the word. I'm just going to say the reasons drug addicts are not the reasons that the conditions in drug factories are bad. Right? I know they're not made in factories, but it's the closest word I can think of.
They're made in little huts in the rainforest.
Yeah. So drug production is not a dangerous thing because of drug addicts. It's a dangerous
because of
thing
illegal.
because, hey, maybe one of the biggest countries in the world deciding to have like an all-out war on drugs was gonna make it a little more dangerous for people that were making drugs. Maybe that's the issue. Seriously, I think the effect that America and the UK, particularly America, really decriminalizing all drugs.
Yeah.
I think that the effect that would have
Come on, Joe.
would genuinely be
You can flip and
incredible.
do it. You
Yeah.
can do it, Joe. You literally are the president. Come on.
Just executive order. Drug, okay.
Drug equal
Illegal.
neutral.
jail.
Yeah.
Don't do, but not now prison slave if you do.
Yeah. Oh my God. Oh
Yeah.
God. Yeah.
At the very least, not now prison slave.
They're going to
just
lose so
wanna-
many prison slaves.
Yeah. Good. Just to point that.
Why
Just
do you
to
think it's illegal?
Okay, just to expand on what Luke said. When you go to prison in the US and in the UK, you essentially become a slave because if you've got to work for well under minimum wage, as in the UK, I think it's a few pounds a week. In the US, it's a few cents an hour. You are essentially a slave.
Unless you're a lawyer or a politician doing coke, in which case you are still a lawyer or a politician.
Yeah. Or if
Upstanding
you're, say, a
member of
white
society.
person smoking weed, you'll be criminalized at a far lower rate than a black person smoking weed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't look into any of this stuff.
No,
because it
don't
will
think
not
about
make you
it.
happy.
Incredibly depressing.
Don't think about it. It's totally normal and rational.
Shall we move on? I think that's a good place to end.
chat.
Deadly Melody in chat said is recommending the podcast Say Why to Drugs, which I've listened to, and it's very good. It's very upfront, just honest information about drugs.
I mean, even that
Very
is
interesting.
that's a really good sort of one-liner. Say why to drugs.
Say why to drugs.
Why?
Not why, not no, say why.
Do you want to do some drugs? Why?
Yeah, why?
Why?
Why would I want to do
Why
that?
would I want to
Why?
do that?
Why would it? Why? Take
Great.
that, peer pressure.
So that is it for this show, I think. Maybe we should talk a little bit about what we've got coming up tonight.
What have we got coming up
episode.
tonight?
An episode. Do you guys remember what episode
On a
it is?
Sunday?
Yeah.
Is it? No.
It's a colour.
What? Yellow fever.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and the crazy experiments done by one Stubbins Firth.
Very stubborn man.
2 Fs.
Yeah, so if you're around tonight, which you should be, come to this channel. We've got a new episode coming out at 7:30, I think. 7:30 p.m. Be there and be square. Anything else
You must
guys want
become
to
a
say?
square before you arrive.
Only squares allowed, sorry.
Two-dimensional, no cubes allowed, no cuboids either,
No.
just squares.
Exit the third dimension and then somehow press your mouse pad to start the episode.
You just press your mouse pad first and then exit.
No, because then you've entered as a
Oh.
not square.
That is so true.
Yeah.
That's so
Have
true.
someone else press it once you've left the third dimension.
Yeah, fantastic.
Go to the second or the fourth dimension. Either's.
Well, that is that. It's the end of our show. We hope you had as much fun as we did. We'd like to thank our patrons for bringing this show to you. And until next time, there's another Sci Guys Live. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Cheerio.
That was great outro, Corey.
Thank you. It is good though, isn't it?
Prolonged eye contact.